Night live here at Southern Sports Gumbo. This is championship week. So we are going to be talking conference championship games, playoff picture, and we will also be going over our team player and coach of the week this week. So I'll get things started with my team of the week. That's going to be the Cal Bears this week. Upset SMU to really cause chaos, and Duke is now playing for an ACC championship. So shout out to Cal after firing their coach, making a huge move and getting a huge win. My coach of the week is Brent Venables at Oklahoma. The task was win and get into the college football playoff, most likely. Um, and his defense got it done. I really give him this coach of the week more as a defensive coordinator than a head coach. But shout out to Brent Venables there. And then my player of the week is Trinidad Chambliss, quarterback of the Ole Miss Rebels. 359 yards passing, 4 touchdowns in the Egg Bowl. You know, Biggest game of their season, win in advance, and they did just that. So shout out Trinidad. So Kevin, who do you have this week for player, coach, and team of the week?
So I'm going to start with Coach of the Week, and I'm going to go with Sark for Texas. Big win over Texas A&M, rivalry game. A&M was undefeated, trying to get your team into the playoffs, and Texas played their best game of the year on both sides of the ball, in my opinion. So I would go with Sark as the Coach of the Week. And I would also stay right there with Texas as the team of the week, with competing again to get in the playoffs. I think they're going to fall a little short, not just on their win loss record, but also from a standpoint of how they played. In a subjective type polls like we have, style points matter. I think if Texas would have been playing like they have the last 3 or 4 games, even with a 9-3 record, they would probably be in. But I think games like Kentucky and Mississippi State that went into overtime hurt them quite a bit too, in the eyes of the people that are making these decisions. And then obviously the Florida loss is a bad loss. But Texas is as the team of the week, Sark as the coach of the week. And I'll stay right there. And look, there are people that have better games than Arch Manning, but when you look at where he was at the beginning of the season towards how he finished, he certainly finished strong. And this is the first year starting, so some of the early things I think could have been expected. He stood up as a leader though all through the year. He never made excuses, and he continued to get better. And he's seeing the results at the end of the season, and will probably go into the season next year as a Heisman candidate. So I guess Texas gets my clean sweep tonight for player, team, and coach of the week.
Nice. So it looks like we lost Sweets here for a minute. So we'll go ahead and move on to our games, and we'll start with North Texas and Tulane. Oh wait, I think Sweets has made a comeback here.
It's made a comeback. We know he wants to express his player and team of the week, um, and because he has been on that group for all year. So and rightfully so. They've played well all year. So Sweets, give us your player and team and coach of the week. We
Yes,
know
sir.
who it's going to be.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The Vanderbilt Commodores, the 10-2 for the first time since the 1920s. Vanderbilt Commodores. Coach of the week, Clark Lee, did a hell of a job going into Knoxville and getting a win over your biggest rival by 3 touchdowns, with everything on the line. With Vanderbilt trying to play its way into the playoff, everything was there for them, and they went out and had the best game they had all season. incredible, which leads me to the player of the week. And somebody who should get some serious Heisman consideration. That's Diego Pavia. He had 268 yards in the air, one touchdown, two interceptions, mind you. He had a 165 on the ground and a touchdown. So he was responsible for.
And there we go. No sweets.
He's right though, in that Pavia definitely deserves Heisman consideration in a weekend where we had a lot of guys not step up to the moment. Marcel Reed being one. Pavia stepped up to the moment and put 40 plus points on Tennessee and gave Vanderbilt a large win. So I agree with him. Pavia definitely deserves to be a candidate for the Heisman. Um, because again, he stepped up in a moment where you need that. So give him credit for that.
Yeah, so let's roll into our games. Let's start with North Texas and Tulane, Kevin.
All right, so I really like this matchup because you have a defensive team and an offensive team. North Texas, number one in the NCAA in total offense right now, 510 yards a game. They've got two freshmen that have been outstanding players for their team. Passing their quarterback, Drew Mastamaker, 3,800 yards, 29 TDs, 4 interceptions, 70% completion rate. He's been outstanding. And then Caleb Hawkins, 1,200 yards on 193 carries, 23 touchdowns. So if you combine what those two guys have done, just touchdowns, just points on the board, you've got over 52. Well, 50. You have 52 touchdowns between those two guys, and they're freshmen. So they're going to take that and their offensive performance against Tulane, and this is where it gets interesting because again, to me, Tulane is a little more defensive oriented, and both these teams are battling for a shot at the playoffs. And and then another interesting part about this is both these coaches are going to coach somewhere next year, and you got Summerall is going to Florida, and Eric Morris is going to Oklahoma State. Uh, North Texas is favored by 3. Again, going back to the Tulane defense a little bit here within this. Tulane defensively, 64th in the FBS, but one of the better defenses in the American Conference, averaging 300 or only giving up 372 yards a game and 22 points a game. So the matchup will be interesting. And Tulane has been played really well down the stretch. They had to win a game in Memphis. They got upset against UTSA, and so then they had to win out and win a game against Memphis on the road to play in this. And North Texas lost to South Florida. Other than that, they've rolled through this conference, beat Navy towards the latter part of the season, and then just continued to play well and put up 40, 50 points a game. And Mastamaker has been really, really good down the stretch of these games. Uh, Last game he played last past Friday, he was 83% of his passes, 20 out of 24. And I think he averaged 13 yards a pass attempt, which is incredible. They say 7 is elite quarterback play, and Mastamaker's been averaging almost double that the last month of the season. So, look, I like both these teams. I think that both of them are worthy candidates. And in my opinion, the winner of this game should get that nod into the playoffs over James Madison. But I really like the way North Texas is playing and the way that they played down the stretch offensively. And I just think they're going to be too much for Tulane because of that offense. Give me North Texas in this one 41 to 30. Let's go 41 to 30. I think North Texas is going to pull away, and that the pressure that they can put on you by scoring points will eventually wear down North Texas and get them the win. What's your thoughts, D Mac?
Yeah, I love this North Texas team. scoring 47 points a game, over 510 yards of total offense. But my favorite stat of college football is the turnover margin, and North Texas is plus 14, third in all of college football in that ranking. So I like North Texas in this one. I know the game's played in New Orleans, down at Yulman Stadium, but give me North Texas here. I'm gonna go 45-27 blowout on the Bayou. North Texas gets a huge win. What are your thoughts, Sweets?
What's the line in this game?
3 points.
North
3
Texas by
points.
3.
North Texas by 3. And DMAC.
And there he goes.
And we are down, Sweets. Some technical difficulties tonight, folks. But we're gonna power through it tonight and get it done. So we will go to the BYU Texas Tech game now. I'll get us started on this one. These two teams played earlier in the season, and Texas Tech won at home 29-7. This game's being played in Arlington. Texas Tech is a 12.5 point favorite. Their offense is really good, averaging 43 points a game, almost 500 yards of total offense, 300 through the air, almost 200 on the ground. Their defense has been really good, only allowing 68 yards on the ground against them, 259 total yards, and only 11 points. Um, this Texas Tech team, lost an early game to Arizona State this year, but has bounced back. They really invested in their football team from a NIL standpoint this year, and it's really paid off. Cameron Dickey's over 1,000 yards on the ground and 13 touchdowns. And then you look at this BYU team, 414 yards of total offense, 34 points a game. They're pretty much top 25 or 30 in most offensive categories. Same with defense, giving up less than 18 points a game and less than 325 yards. Top 30 in both of those categories as well. And both of these teams are really good in the turnover margin. Texas plus 13, or Texas Tech plus 13, BYU plus 12, both good for top 7. I know it's so tough to beat the same team twice in one year, but I like this Texas Tech team. They're really clicking. Jacob Rodriguez is probably one of the best defensive players in the country. Should get invited to the Heisman ceremony here in a few weeks. I'm rolling Texas Tech big in this game. I think they cover the 2.5 or 12.5. BYU, you don't know if their coach is staying or heading off to Happy Valley here soon. So give me Texas Tech in another blowout game. I'm going to go 38-17, 21-point win for the Red Raiders here. What are your thoughts, Kevin?
Yeah, I really like Tech in this game. I would love to think that this is going to be a really competitive game. And I do really like BYU and Kalani Sitake. They play sound football. He's got a freshman quarterback that he's brought along, was thrown in at the last minute. They've had a great season. They're 11-1, and they deserve a lot of credit for that. But the talent matchup in this game to me is just decidedly Texas Tech. I look at this conference as overall, it's a Power Four league, but it's definitely them in the ACC to me are a step way down below everybody else. The one exception is Tech. Tech has the talent. Tech could play in the Big Ten. Tech could play in the SEC. I'm not going to say they're going to win those leagues, but they could play in those leagues and they could win games. And they're very competitive and they're very talented on both sides of the ball, offense and defense. And I just think that's the difference in this game, the talent level. I think Sataki and BYU will play very competitive the first half. Tech goes into halftime with 7 point lead. I think though over the course of the second half they just wear them down, and I think Tech's going to win this game somewhere along the lines 37-20, 17 point margin, and Tech gets into the playoffs for the first time I guess ever, and not even just into the playoffs. They've never really been in discussion, so you got to give them credit for what they've done. They do have the alumni and the NIL money that some other top teams do, and McGuire's done a good job there. I think he signed an extension today, so they've earned it. They deserve it. I think Tech's going to roll.
Yeah, so that brings us to the Georgia Bama game. Get us started on this one, Kevin.
Yeah, this is the game. Kirby wins, has great success, and Bama has been his kryptonite. Everyone used to think it was Saban, but now he's 0-2 against DeBoer the last 2 years. When you look at the matchup, they're very similar on both sides of the ball. Georgia averaged 415 yards. Bama averages 404. Defensively, they're neck and neck. I think, let's see, Bama gives up about 290, and Georgia's right just above that. I think they're 12th and 13th or something in defense. And then, points wise, Georgia scores 32, Bama scores 33. They both give up about 16 points a game. So they're very similar statistically. A couple of things though that stand out to me in this game is Bama will be probably without Jam Miller from that injury the other night, and they have really struggled running the ball. And Georgia's rush defense is sixth best, so that I really see Georgia making them one dimensional in this game. And the adjustments that Georgia made in the second half of this first game earlier in the year, I think they'll continue that as they make them one dimensional, and then they'll put a lot of pressure on Simpson as a passer. And I think that's going to bode well for Georgia in this game. It is tough to beat someone twice, especially if your teams are fairly equal. And I think that's where I view this game. I think it's going to be very tough for Bama to beat them twice. The one stat, and you like to mention a lot, and I agree with you on turnover margin. This is a little skewed, though. Bama's +8 in the turnover margin. Georgia's -1 in the turnover margin. But if you go back to mid-season, Bama was +7. Georgia was about flat. So over the last half of the season, those numbers have been pretty much flat on both sides. Bama built that turnover margin earlier in the season. Another stat that I like in Georgia's favor in this is they're running the ball for 190 yards a game. That was not the case again a month ago. They've really had success over the last 5 weeks running the ball with their offense, and it's not just been one guy; it's been a group of running backs running the ball, and also Stockton having success running the ball on the ground. Georgia's played really well in the last month. The game last Friday, old-fashioned hate, I would say, was not one of their better performances, even though they won that game 16-9. Probably a surprise in the fact that both teams didn't score very much. But I think that could have been a little bit of a emotion in a rivalry game. And I'm going to give Bama credit, for pulling out that game against Auburn, and a game they had to have to get in the playoffs. And I look at that part. I just mentioned those two parts because Bama had to get up for that Auburn game, and in that game, they had to win that game to get in the playoffs. I see them coming into this game probably a little bit down after that. Not down per se, but it's hard to get back up to that same level of emotion that they had to put into that game on the road. And I think Georgia didn't. That was a game last Friday that they were looking forward to this game. I think. So I think the way that this all adds up, Georgia's a 1.5 point favorite. So basically, it's a pick'em game. But in a rematch, and the way the teams are trending, I think Georgia's trending better offensively, and they can make Bama one-dimensional. I think it's a close game for a half. I think adjustments. Kirby has all years made great adjustments, so you factor him in to being able to do that going into this game. Bama's his kryptonite, but I do think this game he gets past Bama. I think they beat Bama 31-17. In a game that it's close again for the first half. They pull away, and this is a game that when you watch it, I think you're going to feel like Georgia controlled this game. Sweets, what's your thoughts on Georgia Bama?
I agree with you, Kevin. I like Georgia this weekend. It's always tough. We talked about this before. It's always tough to beat a good team twice in the same season. This is to being in Atlanta. It's not a home game for Georgia. People always like to throw that out there. Alabama will represent, and that building will be full of crimson. So it's not a home game for Georgia, but Georgia, I believe, is the better team. I think that they're playing better right now. They're starting to, the defense is looking good. They had a rough game against Georgia Tech, but that's going to happen sometimes in a rivalry game. They got out of there with a win against a good team, did what they needed to do to keep it rolling, and now they're in a position to win the SEC and finish, possibly as the number 2 overall seed in the playoff. So yeah, I like Georgia this weekend. I like Georgia. I'm going to call it 27-17 Georgia. DMAC, I don't know if you spoke on it yet, buddy, because I've been in and out. So
No, I haven't yet. And
jump in, brother. Jump
you
in.
took the score right out of my mouth there. I got 27-17 in favor of Georgia written over
So
here.
good if you picked it.
Yeah, I love the way Gunnar Stockton's playing, especially these last few weeks. He can beat you through the air or on the ground, and playing really smart football, 70% completion percentage on the year. I think 20 touchdowns to 4 interceptions or 5 interceptions on the year. Playing really good football when it matters most here in November, and he's hoping to carry that on to December and January. So I like Georgia too in this one. So that brings us to, let's go back to the Troy James Madison game. Sweets, get us going on this one.
Let's do so. James Madison comes in as a huge favorite, 23.5-point favorite, which is just unbelievably high for a conference championship game against Troy. They're on the season. Troy is 8-4, and James Madison is getting ready to try to get in the playoffs here. On their on the offensive side of the ball, James Madison averages about 38 points a game. Troy averages about 25. James Madison gives up 16 a game. Troy gives up 24. Big difference there. Offensively, defensively, just all the way across the board, James Madison is the better team. James Madison has Alonzo Barrett, who was injured last year, but has came back strong this year. He's got almost 2,500 yards through the air and over 400 yards rushing. Their leading rusher, Mr. Knight, has over 1,000 yards on the season. So they're doing what they need to do, and with the win, they could potentially secure the playoff spot as the Group of 5 representatives. So I like James Madison to win this game. I like them to win it big. They're going to do all they can because they definitely need the style points. Give me James Madison 42, Troy 17. What are your thoughts on this one, Kev?
Yeah, I like James Madison. Just very similar to Cignetti, and he builds a team on execution. James Madison's got the more talent, and they're definitely the team that I think will execute well. The only thing that in this game is Chesney is saying now he's going to take the UCLA job. A little different than the other game where you have both coaches taking another job. So potentially maybe James Madison have a little letdown there. I'm not saying they will. It's going to be let's go out for the coach and on this one too. But I like James Madison in this game. Give me them 31-13. D-Mac, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, James Madison is, they're 11-1. They've been playing really good football in the Sun Belt there. So one thing they're really good at is time of possession. They're holding the ball for almost 35 minutes a game. I don't think they cover the 23.5. I do think they win this one. I'm going to go 31-21, 10-point win. And it may not be enough to get them into the college football playoff here. We'll have to see. So that brings us to a night game, Indiana, Ohio State. Um, this game opened at 5.5 points. Ohio State's still a 4.5 point favorite in this game. That's being played in Lucas Oil Stadium. This Ohio State team, every major category on offense, they're top 25, 440 yards a game, 37 points a game. On defense, they are first in total yards, 203, first in passing at 121, first in points, 7.8, and rushing, they're fourth. They're giving up about 82 yards a game. Julian Sayin has been really good, 79% completion percentage, over 3,000 yards, 30 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. Bo Jackson's just shy of 1,000 yards on the season. And, Jeremiah Smith is just shy of 1,000 yards receiving with 11 touchdowns. When you look at this Indiana team, 484 yards, good for top five, 230 on the ground, that's top 10, 44 points a game on offense, that's second in the nation. And then you go over to their defense, where they're fourth overall in yards, second in points at 10.9. So this is, another really good team. Fernando Mendoza's done some special things this year. 2,800 yards, 32 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. At the end of the day, it's just tough for me to pick someone other than Ohio State this year. The way they've looked all season, played a close one for the first half against Michigan on the road in the snow, blew them out there down the stretch. I think Ohio State wins this game and they cover. I'm going to go Ohio State. I'm going to go 31-21 in this one too. Ohio State wins. What are your thoughts, Sweets?
I'm with you. I think Ohio State is the better team here. Don't sell Indiana short though. They've answered the bell every week. That going out to Oregon back in October was one of the more impressive wins on the season in my opinion. Going, traveling from east to west and going out there and getting that win was big. So I think Indiana has the chops. But at the end of the day, I think Ohio State's just a better team. They're more talented. I'm not going to say that they're better coached, but they're more talented and just have a lot more Jimmys and Joes than Indiana does. That's not to sell Mendoza short. He's had a possible Heisman run. You see him in New York along with Julian Sayin, two great quarterbacks in this game. At the end of the day, though, Ohio State I think is the best team in the country right now. I think they win the game. I don't think. What was the line? You said 4.
4.5. Yeah.
Give me Ohio State 28-24. They don't cover. Give me Ohio State 28-24. What are your thoughts on it, Kev?
All right. So, hey, sometimes everybody's got to be a little different. Look, these are two really good teams. Ohio State, everybody thinks they're the best team in the country, and they're talent-wise and everything, I would give them that. 24th on offense, first on defense. But I still don't think Indiana's given the credit that they deserve, in my opinion. They have the fifth best offense, fourth best defense. DMAC, your stat, they're plus 17 in turnover margin. I really like this Indiana team in this game. After watching a little bit of that, a lot of that Ohio State Michigan game the other day, I thought there were times Ohio State looked normal, I guess is the best way for me to put it in that game. And again, when you look, the only game that Indiana had a tight game in was on the road against Penn State. Penn State's a talented team, so I don't look at that as a down. You go on the road and you play a talented team, that could happen. But they had the moxie to step back up in the fourth quarter, and they were behind and got out a win. And I just think when you get into this game, if I look at both teams, I honestly think Indiana's going to come into this game more focused, more prepared, and hungrier in this game. I think Ohio State's looking to the playoffs. Don't blame them for that. They're both in. I think Indiana's looking for we want to win a Big Ten championship. I think you're going to see them fight, scratch, and claw. And I'm going to call the upset in this game. I like Indiana. Look again, they you mentioned the Oregon game, Sweets, and then they destroyed Illinois when they played them. So give me Indiana in this one. I'm going Indiana 27, Ohio State 23. Indiana scores in the last 5 minutes. Maybe this is Mendoza's Heisman moment. We mentioned Pavia earlier as a Heisman candidate. We've been waiting for people to step up. Maybe this is a moment Mendoza steps up, captures that. I still think you favor Ohio State to win a national championship, maybe like they did last year. And I guess it would be interesting to me if Indiana won this game. Do both of the teams end up in the top four? And I think that's probably very likely that they would. So I think you could have both these teams end up with a bye, especially if Indiana wins. But I like Indiana with an upset here.
So that brings us to our last conference game we're going to talk about for the night, and that's Virginia and Duke. I believe Virginia is a 3.5-point favorite as of right now in this one. What are your thoughts on this game, Sweets?
This is very.
And we have lost Mr. Sweets again. Um, well, I'll talk about this game for a minute. Virginia is 8-4 against the spread. Duke is 5-6-1. They pushed one time. So this Virginia team is led by Chandler Morris. 25, almost 2,600 passing yards, 14 touchdowns, but 7 interceptions on the year. Jamari Taylor, 3 yards shy of 1,000 on the ground and 14 touchdowns. So if we look at their numbers a little bit more, 433 yards a game, a total offense, 188 in the pass game, 245 in the 245 in the pass game, 188 in the rush game, 33 points a game. Their defense has been pretty good, only giving up 312 yards a game and 20 points. Both of those good for top 25. And then you flip over to Duke, who has a pretty good offense. They're throwing for just shy of 300 a game, about 425 per game total. They're scoring about 35 points a game. Their defense, though, is where they struggle big time. They're giving up 415 yards a game, 275 through the air, which puts them at 131st. And they're giving up right at 30 points a game, which puts them at 97th. One thing Duke is good at, though, is forcing turnovers. They're +8 in the turnover margin, which puts them in the top 20. And, they've got Darian Mensah, who's thrown for just shy of 3,500 yards, 28 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. Nate Shepherd's, running the ball well, just shy of 900 yards and 9 touchdowns on the year. But I've got to roll with this Virginia team. They just find a way to win games. I know they're sitting at 10-2. But I think they're playing much better football than Duke right now. So I'm going to go Virginia 35-27. I think this is going to be a closer game than, maybe not Vegas expects it to be close, but I think some fans expect a big blowout with a 10-2 team and a 7-5 team. Give me a 35-27 win for Virginia here. What are your thoughts, Kevin?
First thing I want to say about this game is the ACC's got some quality teams that are going to sit at home that are a part of a tiebreaker here that they got it to me. They got to revisit that. And maybe that is if you have a multiple team tiebreaker, you take the highest team right in the BCS poll or whatever we want to call it, the playoff poll, I guess is what it is. Because to me, Duke playing in this game really is not good for football, and it's not good for the ACC. They're already looked at as one of the bottom leagues in this Power Four conference. So we could have had a much better game if we would have had Miami against Virginia or potentially Georgia Tech against Virginia. Um, there's a couple of combinations there that could have been much better than this. All right, that's enough of the soapbox. All right, so when I get into the game, Virginia averages 180 or 188 yards rushing, and like you mentioned, Duke's defense is one of the they're in the 100s total defense. They're not as bad against the run, but they're still not a quality defense. And in Virginia's defense ranks 21st. So when I compare defenses, I think Virginia is going to be able to consistently move the ball, and then I think they'll be able to get some stops. Mintz is going to have to play huge for Duke to win this game. He's a talented quarterback. He's the better quarterback between these two. Morris is a 6-year guy, and as long as Morris stays healthy in this game, I think he'll play solid and won't make turnovers, and Virginia gets the win. Mensa could have a great game. Duke can throw everything, caution to the wind, and go out. They can take chances. They can do all those things. It's a one-game shot, and so I would expect them to do some of those things to really try to win this game. Another stat, though, to me that is just a big stat is the third down scenario in this. Um, Virginia is second, I believe it is, on third downs, giving up only 27%. And Duke is on their offense is they're 76, I believe it is, on third down conversion, 39.6. So again, that's another stat I really like in Virginia's favor. I think their defense will stop Duke a lot of times in this game. So I really like Virginia to win this game. I don't think it'll be that close in the end. I think Virginia wins by 14. Give me Virginia 31-17. Again, if Duke's going to win, Mintz got to play huge. He's got to have the best game of his life. He's got to convert those third downs we're talking about, and he has to play really well to me for Duke to get this win. Duke is +8 in the turnover margin, even though their defense gives up a lot of yards. So that is a plus for them there.
Yeah, so before we dive into playoff picture, the rankings that I've got here posted, let's talk a little Penn State football. Yeah, they fired James Franklin so early in the season to get a head start on their coaching search. We talked over the weekend how James Madison's coach would be a candidate. Well, he's heading to UCLA. So where do you think Penn State can turn now for a coach?
It's a good question. And there's been so many of these people that have gotten extensions, and Sataki is the latest. It looks like Heupel's pulled his name out. Someone that I think would have been really good there, Clark Lee, got an extension and announced it in front of his team. I would like to think they might go back at someone like him, but there's no way he makes that. It's Vandy's is where he went to school. There's no way you say something like that in front of your team and then turn around and leave. But I think he would have been a great candidate. There's two teams I think that have been the worst in this coaching carousel, and that is Arkansas and now Penn State. So one coach we've not heard sign an extension and publicly say anything that you and I both have been high on, and I think he would be perfect for this job because I think he brings toughness. He would bring a good offensive coordinator unless that guy took his place. But I still think he's a good coach, and I think he would find a way to bring an offensive coordinator if he was forced to replace his current one. And that's Brent Key. I don't know if they'll make that move, but if I am Penn State, that's who I go after now at this point. You've got him or Kenny Dillingham, and I do think Dillingham wants something bigger, and he would be good in this job too. And I think it's one of those two. I shouldn't say think it's one of those two. I think it should be one of those two. I don't know what they're going to do because I don't know if they know what they're going to do. Arkansas interviewed 22 candidates, and I was reading some stuff earlier today. Penn State's talk was 7 or 8 for sure. They're a school that big with that kind of tradition. Um, arguably the third best job in this cycle that has came open, and they can't close the deal. That speaks to me to the athletic director, and again, they were the first. They were the first to make a move. There's no reason that they're standing here in this situation. I read where they were really counting on Auburn to upset Bama and try to go land DeBoer, and they talked to Freeman, and again with some of the others we mentioned. But they put their eggs in many different baskets instead of going out and landing their guy. And that to me is really they've mishandled this. They bungled it. Again, they still got a chance. If you can go get Key or you can go get Dillingham, you can end up with a good coach. Other than that, I don't know what they're going to do. What's your thoughts?
I I think Brian Hartline's still a guy that they've got to press a little bit. I think, I don't think Dillingham's leaving Arizona State this year. And I don't know if Brent Key leaves Georgia Tech for Penn State. He's a Georgia Tech guy. I don't know if Penn State's nice enough offer to entice him to leave. Especially, there's clearly some problems up at Penn State right now. So, I think Hartline needs to be candidate number one. But after that, it gets really hazy of some realistic candidates. I would not close the door on a guy like Brian Kelly, who was just fired at LSU. The longer this plays out, he's looking for a job, and they desperately need a coach. As crazy as that sounds, that could be a short term match made in heaven right now for both people. Gets Brian Kelly back at a high end program, and no, things didn't end up well here for Brian Kelly, but still a relatively big name in college football. Gives Penn State somebody to try and build around. But yeah, they have completely botched this whole process. And it makes you think, why do you move on from James Franklin if you had no plan? Um, you know, I
Absolutely.
I do like the Brian Hartline idea. If you end up with like a Brian Kelly or someone else who's been around for a while and hasn't worked out at a spot or two, like you're not in any better of a position without James Franklin. So I still don't think the firing makes sense. I didn't think it made sense in September, and as we're 4 hours from signing day here, or three if you're on the East Coast officially, it makes even less sense to me now. So let's talk college football playoff. What are your thoughts on the rankings that came out tonight?
Yeah, so I think they did a good job. I'll be honest with you tonight. I think they did a good job with things. Um, I would have probably liked to seen Vandy stay ahead of Texas, but Texas did win the head-to-head, so I think that's fair in how they rolled with that. I like the fact that they bumped Bama back ahead of Notre Dame after winning them on the road to Auburn, and I'm kind of interested to see what the weekend will do. I was a little surprised that A&M fell below Ole Miss. I kind of really thought that you would see A&M 6, Ole Miss 7, just even with the coaching changes and that kind of stuff. I thought Ole Miss would be the highest ranked one-loss team, but that's kind of where I thought they would fall. So to me, that's interesting. The rest of it, I think, again, they did a good job with it. Where does that set us up for this week to come and weekend? I don't think any of the teams in the Big Ten and the SEC, I think the teams in those championship games will make it into the playoffs. I think Obviously, Ohio State and Indiana are undefeated, so I think both them make it in. I think Bama and Georgia both make it in. I think even with a Bama loss, they're in. I do think with a Bama loss, though, we might see them fall back to 10 and Notre Dame jump back ahead of them. That's what I would expect. And I think the Juracek mentioned that we would see movement potentially in this top 12 one more time as they do the rankings. He was asked point blank about Miami, and he said we will re-rank all teams. Look, I think if you're on the outside looking in, I don't see how you could um, take a Miami, for instance, and place them ahead of Notre Dame at this point, even though there's been a lot of screams for that. And I'm one that honestly doesn't have a problem with it. I know head to head matters and it should matter, but I think week one, it's not as big a deal as when you're talking week 14 and teams have improved, especially when it was a home game for Miami and it was a 3-point win. I think you should, if you're, if you're a good team, you should win at home when you're playing another good team. So I don't really think that qualifies them 14 weeks later to be ahead of Notre Dame the way that Notre Dame has played since those first 2 weeks. I think Notre Dame is the better team right now. Miami had two inconsistent losses. So I like the way that they rolled with things. And I like where it sets up. And I think it sets up some great matchups too as you get to these things. I think, obviously James Madison and Virginia or North Texas. I'm going to say North Texas. North Texas and Virginia factor in here. Virginia probably ends up at 11, and North Texas ends up at 12. So that 5-12 matchup, with Oregon and North Texas could be interesting, and 6 and 11 with if it stays Ole Miss and Virginia could be an interesting game. And one that I would love to see is Bama at 7-10 go to A&M. I think that would be a heck of a fun game to watch. And then traditionally, 8 and 9 could end up OU and Notre Dame, and OU hosting Notre Dame. So that's two very strong traditional teams. So you could have some really good, interesting matchups the way that this thing lays out. I think, and I do think your top four. I see that top four staying the same. Maybe the way that they're ranked changes a little differently. Ohio State, Indiana loser might fall to 4. And if Georgia wins, they might jump to 2, and Tech might, 3. But I could also see an Ohio State, Indiana loser dropping to 3. So, but I think your top four stay the same, and I like the way some of these matchups. I don't think we see much movement in this at the end. Like I said, if Bama loses, they may drop one, Notre Dame back above them. Other than that, I see it about the same. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, so the committee's got a tough road here with the 12-team playoff. I do think this may be the last year of the 12-team playoff.
This is
you,
16.
you look at, and I'm gonna include BYU. I'm gonna include them as kind of a playoff team right now at 11. Because if they win, that really creates some chaos. Because I don't think Texas Tech sitting at number 4 drops out of the playoff race for losing to number 11, which would then push Notre Dame out. So in that scenario, I guess it would probably push Alabama out at that point if they lose to Georgia. But from, 12, 13, 14, Miami, Texas, Vandy. Vandy's a deserving team of the college football playoff going 10-2 in the SEC. We were talking early in the season, no 10-2 team in the SEC gets left out, and we may even sneak a 9-3 team in if things go right. But I could see, Miami, Texas, or Vandy beating some of the teams ahead of them in a playoff game. Oklahoma, I mean, they've done everything they've needed to, but that offense has not looked good since John Mateer has been back from the hand injury. So I honestly I kind of expected Notre Dame to even be number 8 in this ranking, with maybe OU and Bama at 9 and 10. I'm not upset with the ranking by any means, but you're leaving some really good teams out of the college football playoff. There's been moments where, Miami looks like maybe the second or third best team in the country. Same with Texas at times, same with Vandy at times. Now, Miami and Texas didn't do things well the entire season, but even that loss to Bama for Vandy, it Bama ended up covering with a touchdown, with 26 seconds left or something to extend that lead. But that was essentially, 9-point game. So it's tough, with a team like Virginia, who's going to win the ACC and get the automatic nod. Are they better than BYU, Miami, Texas, or Vanderbilt? Probably not. Maybe BYU. But I don't think they would beat. I don't think they would beat Miami, Texas, or Vandy at this part of the season right now. Um, so yeah, I'm excited to see how things shake out. If Duke somehow finds a way to win this game, you're talking about North Texas and James Madison potentially both getting in, and nobody from the ACC, and you'll have Miami sitting at number. I guess they'd be right outside of the college football playoff at that point. So that would definitely ignite some comments from the ACC commissioner there. But yeah, I mean, I think your top four, if three of them win, one of them has to lose this week. If whether it's Ohio State or Indiana that wins, I don't see the other team dropping lower than three. I think Texas Tech is kind of locked into that fourth spot if they win. So no,
I think
I
you're
was gonna
probably
go to Sweets here, but he's back out
still
again.
having those technical difficulties. I think you're probably right. I think probably Tech is probably locked in at 4, and that's probably deserving. Um, if Ohio State or Indiana loses, their only losses to one of the top ranked teams, top 2 ranked teams, so they should probably drop them no less than 3. Um, yeah, I think that's probably right, and that would give them the first round, or not the first round, the semifinal matchup with an SEC team. I think that does make a lot of sense.
And then, honestly, this is not going to be a popular opinion, but if Alabama wins, I don't think they should move up to the top four.
No, I
I,
would agree with that.
I don't
Uh,
think you could justify a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spot move for them, even with a win.
no, I agree. If you wanted to say an SEC team deserves a bye, and again, this is where to me A&M dropping as far as they did. Look, they were undefeated and they lost a game on the road against a good team. Those things happen. In a crowd of 100,000 people. I mean, to me, A&M should have stayed 6 with the potential if you want to pop them back into that top, or maybe even fifth.
Yeah.
I think an A&M loss on the road to Texas, Oregon's loss is at home in a game that they were controlled. So like I say, to me, that A&M drop is the one that surprises me. A&M probably should have been fifth with a chance to move back up into that. I agree. Bama shouldn't, if they win, they shouldn't jump. You're going to jump 3 one-loss teams to put them back in the top 4. No, I agree with you there. And again, they lost head to head with OU, and OU. I think they would jump somebody, but it's hard. It's hard for me to see them maybe to even if they win, even jumping past 7. I guess Georgia would drop to about 8. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think Ohio State, Indiana, Texas Tech, Oregon, Ole Miss, A&M, all would still deserve to be ahead of them, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Just
and then I mean, you could make the argument Georgia should stay ahead of Ole Miss even with a loss. Like I could see a scenario where with a Georgia loss, Texas Tech moves to third, possibly second. You know, if Indiana's the team that loses, you know, you could have 3 Big 10 teams get buys, which is insane to me.
yeah, that again, I think, like I said, I think that now that we're talking about it, the biggest opportunity in this is how far they dropped A&M, losing on the road to a good team. That to me is I don't see that. A&M should be fifth in this poll. That's just where I will stand on it. Um, I think that's where it should be. You could argue that Georgia should stay ahead of Ole Miss if they lose this game because of the head-to-head. But again, you're talking about Ole Miss went on the road, going into the fourth quarter. They had a lead. They played very well. So, again, if you're 2 top 5 teams, a home field advantage, you should win. If you flip this game and they played at Ole Miss might win that game. Now, obviously, some people are going to scream and say the coaching staff. Okay, but a lot of that staff remains. The defensive staff in whole, and with Weiss coming back to call the plays, he's going to be there. Joe Judge, the offensive line coach, is going to be there. And they still have Shambliss, the quarterback, that got them a lot of wins this year. So A&M should be fifth. That's one thing that the committee needs to relook at that. They should be the fifth ranked team in this scenario, regardless of not taking the Bama Georgia game into consideration, just what they did on the season. They were 11-0, and again losing to a good team on the road in front of 100,000 people in a competitive game should not cause you to drop past other one-loss teams. In my opinion, they dropped past Tech, Georgia, Oregon, Ole Miss. I'll be honest with you. If it was me, I would say they deserve to be fourth. I know Tech gets a lot of credit, and they should end up. They'll probably end up fourth in this thing. But I don't think when you look at the quality of wins, A&M's got better wins than Tech has, in my opinion. And if you look at the loss, Arizona State is not as good a team as Texas. So I know Tech's quarterback was hurt, but again, I know they're dropping them because a little bit of strength of schedule. But heavens, I mean, A&M's played a better strength of schedule than Oregon and Texas Tech. So I don't get that. And again, I don't know. That's the one. That's the anomaly for me. They dropped them way too far, in my opinion.
Yeah. So now that we got Sweets back for a few minutes anyway, what are your thoughts on the playoff picture and the rankings here?
Well, let me apologize. First of all, this has just been an absolute shit. So I apologize for that. The playoff rankings, I mean, the committee was never going to get it right. They couldn't. With the way that things are laid out right now, the 12 best teams won't get in. We talked about that offline, DMAC. I don't think there's any possible way for them to get these 12 teams right this year. And as I'd said a few weeks ago
Well, we lost Sweets again, and but hey, we were at a good stopping point here. Kevin, you got any last minute thoughts before we wrap up here?
No, again, I just look. 16 teams is coming. This is going to cause that. You're going to, at the end of this, you're going to hear screams about Vanderbilt. You're going to hear screams about Texas. You're going to hear screams about Miami, and they're all valid arguments. Those 3 teams should be in the playoffs. We should have 16 teams. Let's go ahead and get there. Take the buys out. One plays 16. I mean, look, you could have Ohio State USC matchup. That would be a great matchup. You could have, potentially a Texas Georgia type game. I mean, boy, you could have some good games in this. Granted, they've already played each other once, and I think we're just ready for that, or that's what I'm ready for. I look forward. You're gonna have two really good team games this weekend. Georgia Bama is going to be an outstanding game, and Ohio State and Indiana are going to be outstanding games. And then North Texas and Tulane. That's another one that I think will be a heck of a football game. That'll be very hard fought for those teams. So, and if you're an Oklahoma State fan, watch North Texas, because not only is that your next coach, you're probably going to get some of those guys on your team next year. So watch the games this weekend. A lot of fun, a lot of playoff stuff, and this is going to be a fun weekend.
Yeah, and unfortunately, if you're a Florida Gator fan, you're likely getting a lot of those Tulane guys too.
Yeah, they got Tulane recruits, Kevin. So hey,
yeah, crazy time in college football. But thanks for listening tonight, guys. We will be back Thursday. Normally we break down one game. I think we're going to break down the SEC and the Big Ten championship this week, and go from there. So we'll see you guys on Thursday. Thanks for listening. Thanks for liking, sharing, and watching us each week. And we'll talk to you soon.